Good evening and welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Fundo Mabalane standing in for Clement Manyatela this evening. It's great to have you with us on the SABC. So on the show tonight, we speak to Professor Prof Stremlau on the deepening diplomatic row between the United States and South Africa, which has now seen Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool expelled from the US. There have been mixed views on the expulsion, some labeling it diplomatic bullying at its best by the Trump administration, while others have said whether the statements are legitimate or not, a diplomat by his very nature must be circumspect in their approach to delicate issues and forge stronger relations, not break them. We'll get just Professor Stremlau's views on this unfolding matter. And then a bit later on, we'll speak to Gauteng Finance MEC Lebogang Maile. He tabled the province's 527 billion rand budget today. He has notably also sounded the alarm on a possible financial crisis. But not so long ago, many would remember some leaders were asked about this looming financial crisis. They feigned ignorance, saying, crisis? What crisis? Well, the MEC will settle this for us tonight. And then a bit later on, we'll be joined by the Northwest Education MEC, Viola Motsomi. The MEC took 7 senior officials to attend the National Special Olympics in Italy. And of course, this was at a cost of more than 1 million, despite the Northwest not having a participant in the Olympics. The glaring question is, she heads the education portfolio and the MEC for Sports attended the Olympics. So why would she also need to head to Italy at a time when all provinces must manage costs? Well, she'll share the reasons with us tonight. But first, my comment. So the further deterioration of the relationship between the United States and South Africa has left many concerned. There were many calls for the South African government to move with speed to mend relations with the Donald Trump administration when Donald Trump first claimed there was indiscriminate confiscation of farmers' land in South Africa, which then quickly led to an announcement of the cutting of financial aid. And then now some say surely that should have been a sign of things to come, because shortly thereafter, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio dropped the bombshell that he wouldn't attend the G20 summit in the country this November, citing anti-Americanism. And of course, he didn't attend the preparatory meeting of G20 foreign ministers in Johannesburg just last month. And then this Friday, they announced the expulsion of Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool. Now, these responses by the United States to certain actions by South Africa, be it the signing of the Expropriation Act or the ambassador's comments on Donald Trump, are most certainly indicative of a departure from long-established diplomatic norms on the part of the President Trump. Rasool, however, was well aware of the troubled water he was headed to. And the question is, did he navigate the tricky waters well enough? This is what he had to say when he started his short tenure as South African ambassador to the United States.
This is probably going to be one of the most difficult assignments that I've had to accept on behalf of South Africa. The first time I came here, it was under President Obama. It was a language of solidarity. I think coming back now with President Trump, there's lots of uncertainty, but I do think that the interests of South Africa remain abiding. And we're going to have to pursue those interests, like our economic interests, like our socio-political interests. But I think we're doing it under enormously changed circumstances. So I would be lying if I did not admit to some nervousness about the assignment that awaits me.
Now, it's apparent that Trump's style of governance or leadership is unorthodox. His first term was marked by an unconventional approach to governance, yet our government consistently relies on the established diplomatic norms in its engagement with the Trump administration. This is, of course, commendable. Diplomacy should be relied upon to resolve all conflict or misunderstanding. Listen to DIRCO Minister Ronald Damula, who maintains that we must keep calm and chart a way forward.
It has happened. We have now to follow all the diplomatic protocols and processes to facilitate the smooth return of Ambassador Rasool to South Africa and work on the transition on this matter. It is also regrettable because he was at a very advanced stage to prepare for the special envoys, to reset the relations and so forth. But we are now where we are. We have to work with what we have, and that is what we'll continue to do, because we believe the relationship between the two countries is mutually beneficial. It is strategic. It has to be maintained.
But this approach seems to have no impact when it comes to the Trump administration, or it's taking too long, the diplomacy. So it dawned on me that maybe South Africa and America are as good as speaking different languages to each other. Maybe South Africa needs to start communicating with Donald Trump in his language, the language of transactions, given that he's viewed as a transactional president, meaning for everything South Africa wants to obtain from the United States, they might need to craft a reciprocal deal. Is that sustainable? I honestly don't know. But at least the conversation around dealing with this relationship is one that many are eager to have, which segues us perfectly into our question tonight. We're asking, are US and SA relations damaged beyond repair under Donald Trump's administration? And what measures need to be taken for the relations to be salvaged? Do share your thoughts with us by sending us your WhatsApp voice notes on 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending that voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds. We do request that it stays at 30 seconds. Or send us an X on @face_the_nation SABC. All right, let's quickly go to an ad break. After that, we speak to our first guest, John Stremlau. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, Gauteng's Finance MEC Lebogang Maile has tabled a R500 billion budget for the province. The 2025-26 medium-term budget speech was tabled today at the Gauteng legislature. The biggest chunk of the budget went to the Gauteng Department of Education, which received more than 69 billion rand, followed by health at 66 billion. MEC Maile joins us tonight to speak more on the budget and Gauteng's economic prospects. Good evening, MEC. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. So, in your address, you started off by touching on the theme of this year's budget and also the complexities that you had to navigate in compiling this budget. Just talk us through the reality and the trade-offs that had to be considered in putting together this budget.
Good evening, Fundo, and thanks for having us. It was not easy. As you know that we get our share from the national equitable share, and we also get conditional grants, and we also have our own revenue. We have said previously that the e-tolls has placed a huge burden on the budget, and it limits the resources at our disposal. But we also have accruals, and over and above that, we had our population numbers being overstated in 2022 by the Stats SA, and it means that we have to lose about 6 billion in addition to that. And prior to that, there was a further cut of about 15 billion into our equitable share. So what it means that in this term of office between 2024 and 2029, our budget is 51 billion rand less. And therefore, the challenges are increasing. As you know, there's about 230,000 people coming to our province every day. So it was definitely, every year. So it was definitely very difficult balancing act to ensure that we firstly impose compulsory cuts in all the departments. And in doing that, we had to make sure that we cushion service delivery, that there's no department that's going to fail to deliver their mandate. And we've been able to achieve that. And
how so? Because one assumes that if there's going to be a significant budget cut, it would somehow compromise service delivery.
Yeah, as you have said, about 69 billion education, 66 billion health, an additional 5 billion social development, 9 billion plus to roads and transport, 5.8 billion to human settlement. It means those departments and all other departments will be able to carry on with their responsibilities. It means we will be able to fix potholes on provincially owned roads. We will be able to fix lights, traffic lights on provincially owned roads. And that's what I mean. We will be able to give people food in hospitals. We'll be able to give them medicine. We'll be able to give kids food in our schools. We spend at least R1 billion giving kids food in our schools. We'll be able to provide transport for kids who are staying 5 kilometers away from the schools. So we've not compromised service delivery.
I want us to be a bit more granular here. So you have a 5-year budget approach anchored on essentially 4 priorities. Let's start with the first priority of maintaining fiscal discipline and ensuring impactful service delivery that you speak of. Now, when it comes to service delivery in the province, it's facing significant challenges. We can't run away from this. They're ranging from infrastructure failures to financial mismanagement and even a lack of accountability. And this is something that was noted by the president as well 2 weeks ago during his visit. So you're saying with the current allocations, they are so strategic enough that you would still be able to address these issues that even the president spoke of?
Yes, we will. But the budget will never be enough, even if there were no cuts, because as I have painted a picture earlier on that we have more people coming into the province, and as people come, they expect to receive services, they expect to get education for their kids, and not just education, quality education. And we've been trying to do more with less all these years, and we will continue to do more with less going forward. We will be making sure that we improve on efficiencies, and that's why we said we will be issuing instruction notes, because there are areas where we think if we can plan better, we can save some money, we can bring about efficiencies. For example, we want to standardize the price of medical equipment and medicines in our hospitals. We are benchmarking with the private sector. There is no reason why, if a private hospital buys a syringe, for instance, I'm just making an example, for about 20 rands, why should we buy it for 25 rands or for 30 rands when we are actually the biggest buyer? So we are also doing that benchmarking exercise, and then we will be imposing standardized prices. That is already done in human settlement. Throughout the country, there's norms and standards. When you build a 40 square meter house, you know what you must pay for, irrespective of where you are. When you build a 70 square meter house, when we build schools, we know schools are not the same. Other schools have got more facilities, other schools are bigger than others. So we'll also do that benchmarking to say, if you build a school of a 1,000 square meter size, how much must you pay? And a school of 2,500 square meter size and all that. So that's the exercise with which the Treasury team is engaged.
And if you lobbied the private sector, specifically those that generally would be service providers, to perhaps establish that, was it based on greed, or there really were issues that forced them to actually increase the price in certain instances?
Well, it's a combination of factors, including corruption. You cannot rule out the fact that some of the service providers are collaborating with government officials. And that's why one of the things we are doing is to profile all our officials who are responsible for procuring these goods and services, one, but two, we're putting them on a compulsory lifestyle audit to ensure people don't live beyond their means. But thirdly, we are the only province that has introduced an open tender system, and we're taking it to a higher level now. We are introducing a digitized, fully automated procurement system. We are starting with a few departments that we will announce. We have already started with our Gauteng entity, which has started in 2022. It has worked well, and we think it can work well in other departments.
So is this, pardon me for interjecting, MEC, so is this just purely for efficiency, or you just want to limit that interface to ensure there is no possible collusion?
Efficiency, it's one of the reasons.
All right.
Corruption is another, and getting value for money as well.
Now, your second priority in responding to some of the issues here, you say responding to high-level provincial risks such as debt management. You spoke about debt management. We know there's currently an issue of declining revenue. You've just spoken to us about the 51 billion that you no longer have this time around. You've got your mounting debt obligations and an increasingly unsustainable wage bill. How do you respond to this in your budget?
Well, we must thank National Treasury for cushioning us, because they've given us an additional 1 billion to deal with the recently concluded wage negotiations, as you know, and I think that has been fixed for another 3 years, so we should not expect any surprises in that regard. But secondly, we are looking at increasing our own revenue, which is going to increase anyway end of this financial year. However, we think that we can do much better if we were to introduce additional measures and look at other areas which we have not optimized. We, for instance, we are fast-tracking the amendment of the Gauteng Gambling Board Act, so that we are able to introduce online gambling. There's a lot of money that is being made there, and we're not getting our share. There are other areas like scrapyards, funeral undertakers, and the list goes on, which are not regulated. And there are other areas where people are paying a very, 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 very minimal amount for licensing fees. And these are businesses that are engaged in big transactions. If you take, for instance, a big hotel or restaurant in Sandton, you might find that they pay about 8,000 rands or 10,000 rands for the whole year on a liquor license. And I'm sure you will agree that in certain instances, that is just a bill of one person. So why can't they pay more? But we also don't want to cripple businesses. We will be reasonable. We will also benchmark with other countries on how they are managing this. And you also don't want to use that as a barrier to entry, because you've got people in the townships who are running ship-ins. You cannot compare them with big commercial establishments that are in these suburbs that I'm referring to.
For anyone listening to our conversation, MEC, around these further revenue-generating proposals, they sound quite good, could be lucrative, where there will be great returns, but it comes down to the time frame. How long will it take for this? Because you're looking to amend the Act when it comes to gambling. You've got all of these scrapyards where you say there's untapped funds here, but time frame, when will all of this now be implemented so that you start to see that revenue?
Well, we've got short, medium, and long-term objectives, as you correctly say. Some will need a bit of process. Already we have introduced the regulations as we speak to you now to increase some of the gambling taxes. So that is happening immediately. There is monies that we are not collecting, for instance, from the Road Accident Fund. If you were to hit by a car and you go to our hospital, we are supposed to claim from the Road Accident Fund, but some of those monies were not claimed. Another one is COIDA. So there's quite a few things that can be done immediately, and we are doing those things that have to be done immediately. And we know that others might take a bit of time, and we are also looking at fast-tracking those things that might take a bit of time.
You also sounded the alarm, though, today around the liquidity issue, saying that the province faces a liquidity crisis, and this is deepening or will deepen if resources are not spent prudently. And then you called on departments to start acting accordingly. Do you see this actually happening? And if it doesn't, what will be the consequence?
Well, it will happen. One of the biggest challenges has been accruals. And the Minister of Finance also spoke about the accruals. And we want to eliminate accruals as a matter of urgency. And that's why we said to departments, we're not going to bail out any department that has got accruals. It means that money must be taken from their budget. And in most cases, these accruals are also affecting the payment of SMMEs. And we said it can't be a province that is known for not paying SMMEs. That's why we are introducing an ombudsman in the event where there's disputes between the department and the service provider. The ombudsman will make a determination, and that determination will be final and binding to all government departments. And what this means is that if an ombudsman says Tando is owed 10 rands, we are not going to allow you to argue and negotiate. We are going to cut that 10 rands from you and pay Tando so that SMMEs don't struggle. Because there are instances where some of the service providers are submitting invoices that are in dispute, or they have not done work, but they are claiming payment from government. So
And
we
then
want
in
to
other-
strike that.
And then in other instances, though, some service providers have even told us as journalists that actually all would be fine, but you find yourself having to close shop or being hounded by people that you borrowed money from, where you've put in your invoice, you're just not paid, and you cannot establish where exactly there's that bottleneck. You're told the CFO today is not in, and then in certain instances when it's municipalities, you're told the MM today is out and somebody else is out, you can't get the signature. Something as simple as a signature leads at times to businesses closing, small businesses where they cannot sustain themselves, and for a year you've been just pursuing to have one invoice paid. How
It's
do you
true.
resolve that when there's no dispute of the amount, there's absolutely nothing that these small businesses knows to be the problem, there's nothing to correct, there's just people that are not in offices or not willing to sign their invoice for some reason or the other?
Yeah, it's people not doing their work, certain instances. In other instances, it's people who are corrupt, who want to be given a bribe before they process invoices. And that's why we are introducing a fully automated invoice system, which is AI powered, so that we minimize human interference also of invoices. And we hope that as soon as possible, we'll have the most advanced digitized invoicing system. We've already started it, starting now on the 1st of April. We will be monitoring it, and we want to make sure that by the time the next financial year comes to an end, we have a fully functional, efficient, reliable system that has got integrity and that's not dependent on individuals for people to be paid, because it's just right not to pay SMMEs.
And I'm glad that you're the one that mentions this element of corruption, that in most instances, because I didn't want it to be me, that actually now communicates that most of these small businesses say, then when everything is fine in that invoice and you have an MM that's not available, that cannot sign, the CFO that's disappeared, they've gone for lunch. Essentially what would be happening here is to frustrate you until you ask, can we have a conversation beyond this? And then somebody has to bribe when they've done the work and they deserve each and every cent of that invoice.
Yeah, in fact, they're not only complaining to you, they're also complaining to us. I mean, I receive a lot of emails every day. I receive information on social media. Sometimes I have to personally call CFO, send emails to the MECs, to the accounting officers to municipal managers. And we can't run government like that. You don't have to know someone to get paid. You don't have to know someone to get work. That's why we must digitize our systems so that there is credibility, there is integrity. I mean, a country like ours, we have come far. I mean, we are a developing economy, but I think we are advanced in many respects. And some of those solutions are there. The banks are using them. The private sector is using them. Why do we reinvent the wheel? In fact, I was told that the Water has introduced that system. PT, we had started with our process. I said, let's look at our process, but also let's compare the Water system. If it's more advanced than ours and it's able to help fast-track payments, that's what we must do. In fact, on the digital procurement process, it's a system that Gauteng has been using since 2020. Yes, 2020. There's no reason why we can't use that system because it has been working well for them, and we just need to improve where it has to be improved. And it will also help with decision-making process because sometimes the reason why there's no service delivery, you issue a tender and the law requires that you must finish it within 60 days or 90 days. But because you receive a lot of applications, there's a department that advertised the tender and received about 3,000 applications. And if you had to go through all those invoices manually, you can imagine how much time it will take. But if you've got a system that is able to help you sift through and disqualify those who don't qualify, you are able to move fast, even in decision making. So it will also help us as government to move fast. I mean, the president has raised the issue of red tape. We are talking about bringing and attracting investment. We've got our investment conference on the 3rd of April. We've got a lot of investors who are saying we've got money, we are ready, we want to invest, but we are not able to get this license, we are not able to get this approval. So if our systems were digitized, there would be a lot of money inflows into our economy. I'm seeing investors every day, and they're complaining, we want to build a factory here, but we're told we can't get this license and all that. So it's not something that sits well with us as public representatives. We want to see this country going forward. We want to see this country flourishing. We've got kids. We worry about what kind of country are they going to inherit if we can't fix these things. So it's not a favor. We've got responsibility, all of us. And that's why we don't have a problem if you criticize us, you raise this issue, you must raise them. If there's corruption, call it by its name and tell us there's corruption and this is the form of corruption, this is the person. And of course, sometimes you might be scared because of your life, that your life might be in danger and all that. Tell me, as a person or the president, whoever that is in government and who have a responsibility to act, we must do our work because we are getting paid to do it. We have taken an oath, and if people don't want to work, then they must leave office. And that's our attitude, that if you don't want to work, you must leave government. The only people who must serve in government is the people who value the honor and the privilege of being in government. And we are doing our best. And I know people think that we are all the same. That's not the case. I can tell you we've got a lot of hardworking individuals who are frustrated by processes sometimes. And of course, there are rotten potatoes, and we have to get rid of those rotten potatoes so that the system must work, the system must serve the people, and we should be able to make a difference. Otherwise, why do we have a government if we are always going to come to your shows and complain and tell you about problems. We shouldn't be telling you about problems. We must be telling you how are we solving those problems.
So given
And
that,
we must
MEC, we'll be certainly looking forward to inviting you when you finally launch the digital leg of your procurement processes. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you very much for indulging us and joining us on the show. That was Gauteng Finance MEC Lebogang Maile speaking to us there following the tabling of the Gauteng budget today. Well, after the break, we speak to the Northwest MEC for Education on her trip to Italy and how she missed the inquiry by the South African Human Rights Commission that deals with scholar transport, something very close to her portfolio, was certainly critical. She'll speak to us on that in just a bit. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, Northwest MEC for Education, Viola Motsomi, made news headlines recently. This after she missed an inquiry by the South African Human Rights Commission into scholar transport challenges in the province, especially in rural communities. MEC Motsomi attended the Special Olympics World Winter Games in Italy while the inquiry was ongoing. She says she did not receive an invitation from the Human Rights Commission. MEC Motsumi faces the nation tonight. Good evening, MEC. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So, as you've heard, you're being accused of skipping the Human Rights Commission inquiry on scholar transport to go and attend the National Special Olympics in Italy. And of course, this was at a cost of 1 million, despite your province not having any participant in the Olympics. Just explain to us what exactly happened there.
Okay, no, thank you very much for the opportunity. And also let me take this opportunity to extend my greetings to all the viewers who are currently watching this interview. I think, Mfundo, let's start where you indicated that this particular trip, actually, it has costed the province or the department more than 1 million. Just to clarify that particular issue, to indicate that it is not true, we had 6 delegations to Italy where they were representing the province. And in terms of the costs, it is less than 1 million. According to the SCM processes or procurement processes, anything beyond 1 million, it must go for a tender. So the whole trip, it did not actually cost 1 million. But going back to the question.
All right. Just pardon me there, just for clarity on that point. Then do you know at this point how much it cost?
From where I'm sitting, the report that I received from the Department of Education for the 6 delegation that represented the province there, it was close to 900,000, around that particular figure.
So almost 1 million, though.
But it's not 1 million.
Fair enough.
That is why we have to verify and indicate to say that there were 6 representatives who were representing the department in Italy, where all the procurement was, that particular procurement, it was not 1 million, or it was not even over 1 million.
So 6 representatives, meaning there were 5 officials and yourself as the MEC, or this
Yes.
now also includes the Sports, Arts and Culture MEC as well?
No. It is not including the MEC of Sports, Culture, Sports and Recreation. Remember, we are independent from each other in terms of issues of supply chain. Therefore, they've made their own, actually, procurement.
So it was the 6 specifically from your portfolio, and it was at around 900,000. Fair enough. And then comes the other issue of this was taking place at a time when the Human Rights Commission was dealing with a critical inquiry around scholar transport issues, something that speaks directly to your portfolio. And that is the kind of inquiry you most certainly would want to prioritize. The question many have been asking is why you would miss that specific inquiry and find yourself in Italy watching the Olympics when there is no participant from the Limpopo province.
Okay. Mfundo, let me start by indicating that I did not receive any invitation from South African Human Rights Commission. If I had that particular invitation, obviously, I would have actually prioritized the commission, because this particular commission, remember, it was dealing with issues that actually are challenging my department, which is scholar transport, which is something that is the core mandate or the function of this scholar transport does not even belong to the Department of Education. That is why I'm forever frustrated not having powers actually even to intervene where there are challenges of scholar transport. I can confirm before the media here that I would have prioritized that particular commission. But by the way, let me indicate the processes. That was an official trip. Yes, I was invited. I did not invite myself or the department to the Special Olympics. And I must indicate that as the Department of Education, because I've realized that there's a serious confusion to say that actually I was not supposed to be in that particular trip to Italy where there were Special Olympics. When it comes to the Department of Education, like I've said even before, our core mandate is to deliver quality education to our learners. But it must also be noted that as the department, we are having inclusive education, which also includes sports, meaning that it is also our responsibility as the Department of Education that our learners are exposed or are subjected to sports. Remember, it does not mean necessarily that it's automatic that our learners are automatically talented when it comes to issues of curriculum. That's where those who are still lacking in terms of issues of curriculum, if you give them an opportunity or you expose them to sports, they ended up being players playing for Kaizer Chiefs or your Orlando Pirates and so on. So I wanted to clarify that particular part because there's this thing to say that I was not supposed to be there. By the way, the invite was influenced by what? When you talk about Special Olympics, there is where learners with special needs from special schools, and special schools belongs to the Department of Education, where they are participating. You are 100% correct to say that there were 6 learners actually from Gauteng who were actually representing our country in those Special Olympics. But the reason behind my invite, it was very clear and straightforward to say that MEC, next year, 2022, Limpopo was hosting National Special Olympics. Therefore, for 2026, for Summer Games, you will be hosting officially the National Olympics, where other provinces, you'll be hosting other provinces. And meaning that as the host, it is your responsibility, obviously, because these particular learners with special needs, by the way, I'm talking about learners with disability, they must form part, it's automatic, they have to form part of the team that will be representing our province. Now is the responsibility of making sure that you provide them with the necessary resources.
Okay. So essentially it was for, pardon me for interjecting there just in the interest of time. So essentially the Northwest Education portfolio went there specifically for research and benchmarking purposes. Granted. But I want to take you back now to the specific inquiry. You say you didn't receive an invitation. In hindsight though, don't you believe that some within your office would or should have been looking out for such inquiries that speak directly to your portfolio? To say, if anything, they should have been the ones to alert you that there's going to be a 3-day inquiry around scholar transport challenges. And we think that our portfolio should make submissions. It would be quite beneficial. Don't you think that somebody should have noted or been constantly looking out for such?
It is a matter of the procedure. When we talk of commission, they are the same as portfolio committees where we are accountable to. Issues of administration are being dealt by the Office of the HOD. It will depend on the commission whether they want the MEC to be part of the delegation or only the Office of the HOD must be part of the delegation. A practical example must be given. By the way, this commission took 3 days.
Yes.
From day 1, the HOD was expected there together with our delegation on day 2. And then day 3 is where I was actually informed by the HOD during the commission. By the way, I was informed during the commission when there was a concern raised regarding the MEC not attending this important commission. That's where the HOD actually communicated with me to check whether did I receive the invitation or did I submit the apology. And I did indicate to the HOD that I've checked with my office, because you are right, my office is responsible for communications or whatsoever. But unfortunately, from my verification, from my office, the office did not receive any communication or any communique from the commission. And by the way, still on that, remember, when you depart to another country, an official trip, obviously, processed or authorized by the Premier. Immediately after the authorization, I must indicate that there was an acting MEC that was appointed to act as the MEC of the Department of Education. If I had, for example, that particular communication, I was definitely going to make sure that the acting MEC also forms part of the commission. Like she does, there are some activities that she was supposed to attend, like the NCOP, where I was supposed to appear before the NCOP regarding issues of infrastructure. So I've done an official handover to the acting MEC to say that now it is her responsibility of making sure that she attends those particular activities. But like I said, it's a matter of priority. Mm-hmm. As much as I would definitely prioritize learners with disability, I would also consider prioritizing the commission as it speaks to the issues that are currently affecting my department and I don't have control over it.
Mm-hmm. But
so
just for clarity, the HOD though did attend.
I can confirm that the HOD did attend the commission together with the delegation. Hence, he called me to indicate that there is a concern raised here, to check whether I was aware of the commission on that particular day that I'm expected. And I did confirm to him to say that, unfortunately, I did not receive any invitation.
All right. MEC, thank you very much for joining us on the program this evening. That is Northwest Education MEC speaking to us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. South Africa and the United States of America's already frosty diplomatic relations on a slippery slope. At the heart of the latest row are comments by the now expelled South African ambassador to the United States, Ebrahim Rasool. Rasool was speaking on U.S. policies during a webinar organized by the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, where he referred to U.S. President Donald Trump as a white supremacist, something the Trump administration took exception to, leading to the announcement, of course, of the ambassador's expulsion. Now, among the many questions is whether the two nations can mend relations, and most importantly, what would it take to do so? Joining us to discuss this is Professor Prof Stremlau from the Wits University's Department of International Relations. Professor, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. Professor, many are watching helplessly as the relationship between the United States and South Africa unravels, from the misinformation around the country's land policies to the cutting of financial aid and now the ambassador's expulsion. What do you make of this latest salvo?
I think you have to take a deep breath and realize how complicated South Africa is. America is as complicated a democracy as South Africa's is, and even more so, perhaps, because it did elect Donald Trump. But Donald Trump does not represent the American nation. And Patrick Gaspard, who was former ambassador here, said that Marco Rubio in his campaign said far worse things about Donald Trump than did Ambassador Rasool.
Mm-hmm. Professor, you said something very important here. Oh, unfortunately, it seems we've lost the professor. I'm hoping that we can just try and re-establish that line, because there's something that we most certainly would love to quiz him on. Because Professor has just stated that Donald Trump does not necessarily represent the American nation, and gone on to state that what we're seeing here is an issue of Ebrahim Rasool stating exactly or doing the same as what Donald Trump has done. It's nothing that many would see as unfair. But most certainly a very important question is just around whether Donald Trump, a first citizen, the president of the country, does not represent the nation, because some would beg to differ and say that if anything, most nations now need to appreciate and recognize President Donald Trump's legitimacy, because he's a president of a democratic country and he was elected democratically. So that is a question I wanted to pose, that if we say he does not represent America, who does he speak for? Because he was elected, he's a president, which says to us that if he had policies of protectionism, this is exactly what Americans voted for in the majority, and he became their president. So many would argue that he does represent America. I'm hoping that we do have Professor Stremlau back on the line. Professor, can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, Professor.
I can hear you fine.
Wonderful. I want to quiz you or challenge you on just that statement that Donald Trump does not represent the American nation. How so, when he's a president that was elected democratically?
Well, he was elected by a plurality of 1% over Kamala Harris, and a few close matches in states that gave him the Electoral College majority. But to say that Donald Trump represents all of America is like saying that Jacob Zuma represents all of America, or even Cyril Ramaphosa now today, although I think Cyril Ramaphosa has a greater claim than Jacob Zuma did, certainly after the state capture scandal. And, you know, the recent polling shows that Donald Trump is suffering among the voters.
But do these nuances count, though, to say that President Cyril Ramaphosa does not represent all of South Africa? Of course, in an election, there would be other political parties that were voted for. Do these nuances, as great as they are, and these are the technicalities, but do they matter in this instance where you have somebody now installed as the president? Meaning, whatever happens now, the policies that will be implemented in that country are the policies of that president. So do the nuances matter here? Or perhaps we need to start, whatever the views may be about President Donald Trump, that it starts with recognizing his legitimacy as a president of America?
I recognize his legitimacy because I was an observer for the Carter Center in Georgia, and I know that he won fair and square. And so I can't question his legitimacy, but that is a transitory thing. He's now embarked on tariffs and other things that are going to impact on the U.S. economy. And, you know, people vote their pocketbooks. And if they're not happy with how he's performing, we'll see it in the 2026 congressional elections and then in the 2028 presidential elections, which he cannot run for.
So then how does South Africa navigate these waters now? Because the relationship is unraveling before our very eyes. We've heard the South African government, it's impressed upon all parties to maintain established diplomatic decorum. But we know tweets are often posted first of late when it comes to the Trump administration. And it's our understanding specifically with the Ebrahim Rasool expulsion. Indeed, the tweet came first and the note verbal to South Africa came second. How does South Africa's government deal with this departure from established norms when engaging the Trump administration?
Well, it is a departure from the norms, and it's not normal diplomatic practice to tweet out condemnations of another country, as did Marco Rubio before the.
All right. Unfortunately, we seem to have lost Professor there. Maybe let's check some of your comments. The question we're asking is, are U.S. and South African relations damaged beyond repair under Donald Trump's administration? And more importantly, what measures need to be taken to salvage those relations? Let's look at some of those comments. All right, Dennis Malele says President Cyril Ramaphosa should attempt to build a personal rapport with Trump, which may help to improve relations between the two countries and align more closely with U.S. interests. Very interesting comment. Bono says, hi, Mfundo. Hello, Bono. Maybe it's time we cut ties with the U.S. and establish new and mutually beneficial relationships with other countries. We don't need a country that wants us to run things their way. Trump administration must be a lesson. Let's work with people who want to work with us. All right, very interesting views there. And opposing views, in fact, because you've got one that says perhaps the president must build the rapport with the Trump administration and possibly align our interests to theirs. Some would say that is quite controversial and actually compromises our own sovereignty, that you don't necessarily have to align your interests, but if anything else, you have to find a way to cooperate with each other. And then the other view is that we need to sever ties, just choose whomever chooses us. Very interesting. I believe we also have some voice notes. Let's listen to those.
Sam Alekotrikopis Mfundo Dumela. Fortunately, we have a president who has been a mediator for a long time. I think this does not even give Ramaphosa a nightmare. He will definitely mend our relationship with America if only Trump is ready to smoke a peace pipe with South Africa. Bye-bye.
All right, interesting view there from Sam Godrikopi saying the president has been a mediator for far too long. Professor, you've heard some of those comments, voice notes, as well as tweets that we just read out now. In closing, because we have unfortunately run out of time, in closing, the conversation now has moved to who would then replace the ambassador, Ambassador Rasool, in this respect? What kind of characteristics, of course, we may not have a name right now, but what kind of characteristics should the person actually embody or possess, given the volatility of this relationship now that we're watching unfolding in real time?
I would advise that not to replace anytime soon, because it is impossible to deal with the Trump administration given its prejudices against South Africa.
So any person who's deployed would probably be discouraged.
That's right. I think that Cyril Ramaphosa and the DIRCO should concentrate on building bridges to all of the other countries that support South Africa and admire South Africa.
All right, Professor, thank you very much for the time. We do apologize for that very choppy line, but I think we got the gist of the professor's views. That is Professor Stremlau from the Wits University's Department of International Relations, and that's where I leave it for this evening. Enjoy your evening further. Clement is back on Thursday. Good night.